welcome to our first Zoom interview that the Milton Keynes Business Leaders Partnership is conducting. I'm sure it's going to become part of the norm going forward for us, but thank you again for being our first interviewee. So I guess before I get through the questions around what's happening with business and the general business environment, I wanted to ask you about SEMLEP itself, Hilary, and it must be challenging for you guys to do business as usual, given that the government is focused now, quite significantly on COVID-19. And I wondered, how are you and the team coping? How are you doing during this time?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ruby. And I'm honoured to be your first Zoom interviewee. We're all getting very used to using Zoom and other forms of virtual meetings at the moment, and I'm sure it's very good for the environment that we're doing that. Yes, from a SEMLEP perspective, we moved to everybody working from home in March, and it's actually going very well. A number of my senior team have childcare responsibilities, and I think that's probably one of the most challenging things for them, juggling that childcare, home tuition with what they need to do. But everybody's working together well. We have regular contacts. We've been supporting our teams. We're very concerned about their mental and physical health and well-being whilst they're at home. But our big focus is on supporting businesses. And the Growth Hub team, our business advisors, have been working really hard. And I think it's fantastic. The numbers of inquiries that we're having from businesses has obviously gone up, but we're having really good engagement with our local authority partners, with organisations such as yours, regular meetings and catch-ups that I think are really useful, certainly for us to gather intelligence and feed that back into government, and hopefully for others to hear what we have to say.
Oh, brilliant. So it seems like it is pretty much business as usual, just in different locations. So Hilary, I guess, you said you're staying in contact with businesses, regular contact with various business organizations. So what are you actually hearing from businesses in SEMLEP area currently, particularly around their feedback on the government loans, on the furloughing, initiatives that the government have put forward? Have these been well received?
That's a really interesting question, and it has changed over the weeks. I mean, initially, when the government announced these initiatives, particularly the need to access grants from local authorities was causing some issues, and that's where our business advisors were hopefully able to provide a lot of advice and support and information through our website. But generally, the support from government has been well received, and when we've heard issues about any difficulties of accessing that support, then we've taken that up with government, and things have changed, as you will know, over the last few weeks. So looking at furlough, first of all, that's been really well used. I mean, you'll know that nationally probably more use than the government was expecting, so it is going to have a big impact on the national economy. Businesses have found that it's reasonably straightforward to apply for furlough. They need to make some difficult decisions about being absolutely clear which employees that they can say will not need to work at all, and maybe keep a few on to keep the business going. A little bit complicated for businesses with fewer than 100 employees to access the scheme, and I know that there was a lot of support given to by SEMLEP and other intermediaries to help companies. I think that the key issue at the moment with regard to furlough is, how's it going to come to an end, and will there be flexibility as it comes to an end? Because clearly it won't work for businesses to have people not working one day and then 100% back the following day. People need to ease in, and we've had some really good thoughts from FSB, for example, and other business organisations, and we'll certainly make sure those points are made to government. With regard to loans, again, I think the concept was well received. A little bit of difficulty in terms of actually accessing the loan funding, and I think the banks were really doing their best, but clearly if you lend somebody money, you need to be sure for their sake that they're able to pay that back. So that's taken a little bit longer, and there were some challenges at first, but I think that's going better now. And then when the government announced their bounce back loans, which will mean that it will be possible for the smaller businesses to borrow small amounts of money and get access to that quite quickly, then I think that's going to help. With the local authority grants, as I said, it was a little bit of a slow start, but then I think local authority colleagues really worked incredibly hard to get money out. What they're finding now is that it's sort of that they've got perhaps 80% on average of the grants out, but actually accessing those last 10 to 20% of businesses has been a little bit more difficult, and there have been those businesses that fell through the gaps initially, which again we've made representations back to government, and they have now announced this discretionary grant that local authorities can provide support to perhaps businesses who don't pay business rates directly but pay it through their rent. So that I think will be quite challenging for local authorities to administer, but it does give them that opportunity.
Yeah. So quite a lot of different things for businesses to access, but I guess just accessing them and knowing which way to go and where they can get support is a little bit of a challenge. So Hilary, you mentioned briefly earlier the Growth Hub. So I understand you've launched this through the SEMLEP Growth Hub and Cranfield, a new business response program, I guess, that the two organizations have set up. And I wanted to sort of understand a little bit more about what the phases of support were within this business response program, and what's a take-up been from businesses in the area.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean the Growth Hub, as I said earlier, has been really active, and we've been running webinars, and our business advisors have been answering questions. We've been looking at how we want to move into the recovery phase, and working with Cranfield University on a business response programme. We decided that that was a good starting point, but we've tailored it so hopefully it will really match the needs of businesses across the patch. It's basically 3 phases within this programme. So the current phase that we're sort of all in at the moment is Survive, and so we are running with Cranfield a series of 20 webinars, and culminating in a series of 3 taking stock webinars this week and early next week. And what they're doing will be looking at all of the lessons learnt over the series of webinars and planning how we move into the next phase, and the next phase we're calling Stabilise. I mean, you'll know there's people are referring to these phases with many different ways, words, but we're focusing on Survive, Stabilise, and then either recover or bounce back or grow, whatever we however we wish to look at it. So next week we'll be moving into the second phase, which is the Stabilise, and we're going to have be running with Cranfield a series of workshops, and that will be sort of how do you navigate your way through the crisis, and particularly looking at business models that will help people to do things differently when they come back to work, and hopefully this will actually be well placed with the announcement that government are going to make on Sunday about moving into the next phase, coming out of the lockdown. So those workshops hopefully will be well timed.
And the take up, has that been good for these webinars?
Has been really good, yes. In fact, we are so pleased with the first webinar that we run, which seems a long time ago now, a few weeks ago, and we got nearly 300 businesses on it. Brilliant. So it's fantastic. It's a really good opportunity for us to get messages out to more businesses and to get input in. I mean, we have, and we're learning. We're all learning all the time in this new way of working. And I think there are some issues. I mean, for example, cash flow has been a really big issue for businesses, and we've learned that you can't really talk about cash flow to 200 people all at the same time. And we will be working with our accountants and others in the area to maybe do some more tailored workshops and support. So there are some things that work better for smaller numbers or one-to-one support, but some of the bigger issues, and particularly early on about helping people to understand what was available, then they work really well.
Great, brilliant. So moving on, I guess, back in September, you spoke to the business leaders, the Milton Keynes business leaders, setting out the local industrial strategy, which would boost the Oxford-Cambridge ARC initiative. I appreciate that this will have slowed down, and you mentioned that SEMLEP are reevaluating the delivery of this strategy in light of the current COVID-19 crisis. Can you provide us with a little bit further information on what this reevaluation looks like?
Yes, absolutely. As you say, we launched our local industrial strategy. We set up an implementation steering group, and that got underway just before Christmas, and now we were moving forward in terms of delivery. And one of the first focuses of that delivery was around looking at the need for medium-sized commercial premises that would enable businesses to scale up and maybe have some space to develop perhaps a bit of engineering space or laboratory space. So those sorts of premises, and we did quite a bit of work on that and got some really good feedback from our local authorities, from our development companies in the area. But then sort of COVID-19 hit us all, and so we had we put in place an informal board meeting. So we've got all our board members together on the 23rd of April, and we set out for them our proposals in terms of reviewing the local industrial strategy. And what we're proposing is not a sort of complete review, because actually it's a well evidenced document, and it's all about economic growth, and that's what we're desperately going to need as we come out of this difficult situation. The local industrial strategy, you may recall, was sort of based around the 5 themes of the government's national industrial strategy. So ideas, people, infrastructure, business environment and place, and they're all absolutely as relevant as when the document was published. So what we have suggested is that we focus particularly on the business environment section, and that's really where some of our thinking that we've just talked about around how we're going to tailor our business support, how we're going to use the business response programme. So that will be the focus of business support going forwards. In terms of infrastructure, I think there will be, all of us are sort of finding these different ways of working both challenging, but also there are some really positive points, and we suggest that digital infrastructure is definitely coming up the agenda in terms of we need to ensure that we have that high
I guess we've proven that we can work like that now, having been forced into that. Yes,
absolutely. So hopefully that sort of behavioural change bit has moved on, but maybe other forms of infrastructure, perhaps road improvements in a more traditional sense, perhaps not going to be such a big priority. So we'll be certainly reviewing our infrastructure requirements. Energy, utilities are important, and I think in terms of public transport, again, there's certainly going to be some issues around whether people will feel comfortable using public transport. Maybe electric vehicles might seem to be an even better and safer alternative. So we need to look at our electricity infrastructure as well. So a lot of work around infrastructure, but the broad principles around that, we need to focus on innovation, the opportunity of this SEMLEP area at the centre of the Oxford Oxford to Cambridge arc is still the place where ideas can be commercialised, where we can work with our universities, use the tremendous assets that we have in the area. Hopefully, MKU will be coming along. We've got the Institute of Technology at with Milton Keynes College, so lots to build on there. So this the SEMLEP area, Milton Keynes, at its centre, we feel will be an important part of the country for moving us out of the current situation and into recovery for the reasons that it's always been.
Yes, no, so we're lucky to have that already in place, so ready to go. Yeah. Something more traditional, will there be any changes to the delivery of the local growth fund, i.e. timings, bidding rounds, etc., to take into account the situation we're in, or anything further on any other grants that might become available now?
Yes, that's interesting. Clearly, we've been reviewing all of our currently funded projects. The £265 million pot of local growth fund was due to be spent by March 2021. Government are still saying that is the case, although what was announced in the budget on the 11th of March was that there may be some flexibility around that end year, and there will be a bit more funding available at a national level, but that probably won't be available until the next financial year, so 2021, 2022. But in terms of our current programme, we're very much working with all of our project managers to help them through this difficult time. And I'm pleased to say that virtually all of the projects have been able to continue. We've been able to give them the funds that they need. We understand there may be a little bit of a slippage in the outputs that they might have delivered, particularly in this quarter, and we have negotiated with government the ability to not to report on this quarter, but to move that forward. But no, we're still at the moment, and we've got a board meeting on the 20th of May that we'll be reporting to, that we will be able to spend the funds. In terms of bidding rounds, we carried out a bidding round so that finished in January, and then we've been reviewing and appraising the projects since then, and we have a good pipeline of projects, because if we were hoping that government would be starting to consult on a new pot of funding, this so-called UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which there was due to be consultation on in May. That's not likely to happen at the moment, maybe later in the year, but as we touched on earlier, because government have rightly used a lot of resource to support businesses, the timing of the next spending review and the amount that will be available then is still a little bit uncertain. So we hope that there will be more funding coming available, and what we would want to do is to use the slightly refreshed focus of the local industrial strategy and our recovery package, so that any funding that does become available is focused on helping businesses to get into that next growth phase.
Great. Hilary, you covered some of this a little bit earlier, but finally, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the immediate future for businesses, the sorts of strategies that they should be implementing to ensure that they regain control and ultimately bounce back. Any words of wisdom from what you've been hearing over the last few weeks?
Yes, I think, as you say, we've touched on it a bit. I mean, basically, businesses clearly will be looking at opportunities as they come out of the present situation. And I'm pleased to say that we are hearing from a lot of businesses who are being imaginative, looking at flexing what they do, taking advantage of new opportunities. So really, I think it's very much about reviewing your business strategy. Looking at costs, looking at your competitors, looking at your customers, thinking about how their needs may have changed, and their whole way of working, and you know, I think there's going to be a huge impact on all of us as we come out of the lockdown, and clearly businesses will need to think about that. So making sure that it's easy for people through using social distancing and safety measures for your customers to engage with you as a business will be really, really important. Looking at your supply chains, how resilient they are. I think again we've learned a lot during this period, that, and it's always something I know that all business advisors say, always be clear about your supply chain, keep them informed, and I think people will be doing that even more than they have done in the past. And then I think making use of digital marketing, making use of virtual meetings, different ways of communicating, that's going to be really, really important. And I think just one thing that we would say is, you know, there's a lot of help out there, and SEMLEP and the Growth Hub are really there to help. But we know that local authorities, business organisations, there's a fantastic amount of really good advice and support out there. So I think the message to businesses, you're not on your own. Do go out and talk to people, and there is a way through, and a lot of it is about mindset, and I'm pleased to say that there's some really positive businesses in the Milton Keynes area.
Yeah. Well, Hilary, thank you very much. That was some really positive stuff that's come out of that, and I think, you know, whilst businesses probably know some of what's going on, the likelihood is that they don't know everything that's available. So again, encouraging my guests to go onto your website, to go on and look at what's available out there. So thank you very much for being our first Zoom interviewee.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Yes, to see you.